Hello and welcome to the video. Today we're going to be looking at the ZModeler 3 basics. We will be covering modify tools, surface tools, create tools, display tools, selection tools, as well as vertex mode, object mode and polygon mode. We will also be checking out primitives as well as miscellaneous tools. A lot of these tools have their own settings. I'll showcase these as we showcase the tools themselves. Let's begin. So this is what you'll be met with when you first start ZModeler. It might vary a little in terms of how it looks, but it's simple enough for you to configure your layout. So first things first, we're going to start with the move tool. And we're going to create a primitive to begin with, so we can move it around and I can show you guys what it does. So I'm going to create two for this example. And I'm going to put one inside the other. So you got one here, and you got one here. Okay, so move tool. By default, it'll have nothing turned on. Or it shouldn't anyway. And you can basically click on any object and move it around. It also works for faces as well as edges and also vertices. We'll be checking that out later. So, with the move axis only setting on, it will move the axis of the object instead of the geometry of the object. So you can move the little axis around. And with affect children on, I'll only show this once on this tool, but it's the same for the rest of them. Basically just means that the effect of the tool will also transfer to the children of it as well, or of the object. So you move this one around and it moves the other one around. That is the move tool. On to the next one. This is the rotate tool. And again, we're going to be creating a primitive for this to mess with. The settings for this are rotate geometry, rotate axis, affect children, and rotate normals. Rotate geometry doesn't actually have to be on by default. You can still rotate stuff. I'm not sure why it's like that. It might have something to do with edge mode and vertex mode. Rotate axis does exactly what it says on the tin. It rotates just the axis. And how it rotates depends on whether or not you have pivot turned on. So right now pivot is turned on and it will rotate around the pivot helper over here. And if I move the pivot helper over here, it will rotate around that point. So let's just reset the pivot to origin. And with the pivot turned off, it'll rotate around its local axis. That's this. Affect children does the same as what it did with the move tool. Basically just means that whatever the tool does will also affect the children of the object. And rotate normals, this is related to vertex mode and I think polygon mode as well. When you rotate individual sets of edges or vertices in there, then it'll rotate their normals to match. And that is the rotate tool. On to the next one. The next tool is the scale tool. It doesn't have any specific settings. We're going to create primitive, show you what it does. You can control and left click to bring up a box where you can set the specific scale and whether it moves on all of the axes. If you want it to scale on all the axes, then you need to toggle it before you set the scale. So I'll set this to 150. And then we'll hit enter. It gets bigger. And this will scale from the pivot, or it will scale from your local axis depending on whether or not pivot is turned on. To scale, all you need to do is hold left click and then drag. If you want to scale on all axes at once, you hold shift, left click and then drag, and it will scale on all the axes at once. And that is the scale tool. On to the next one. This is the mirror tool. These are the settings for it: mirror geometry, mirror axis, and affect children. Affect children works the same way as it did with the move tool. The effects of the tool will affect the children of the object. So let's mess with this. We're going to leave it just on standard. So what we can do with this is if pivot is turned on, we can mirror on the x-axis. This matters. These are the axes, like the different axes you can lock onto. You can change the individual, how the axis is basically handled. It can be local to the object, it can be local to the world, or it can be your screen. By default, it's on screen. So for example, from top view, x-axis is left to right. From left view, x-axis is front to back. That's how that works, basically. And local is local to whatever the object is. But we're going to stay in screen mode for the showcase of this. So we've locked it to X. Pivot is still turned on, which means when we mirror it, the pivot will determine how it mirrors. It's not mirroring via its local axis. Then we'll left click to mirror, and it'll mirror it. And we can also turn on mirror axis to mirror the axis. And that's moved that. And then we can turn off pivot and fix the axis as well. So X is facing to the right, which is generally how it is, at least from top view. We also have mirror geometry. I think this is specific to polygon mode, vertex mode, and edge mode, but I am not 100% sure. It's something you guys can experiment with yourselves. On to the next one. The next tool is the delete tool, and it does exactly what it says on the tin. It deletes objects that you left click. It does have some settings. There is delete and relink. Relink basically will delete the... So for example, if you delete the parent object and the parent object has children, the children will basically move out of the parent and they won't be deleted. If it's just standard delete, then whatever is inside your parent will also be deleted. So we can just delete this box. On to the next one. The next tool is the flip tool, and it's as simple as either pressing F while hovered over an object or a polygon, or left clicking while the tool is active, and it'll flip all of the faces. It can flip selected faces in polygon mode as well. But do keep in mind that in polygon mode, it will not reset the normals, so that will have to be fixed yourself. Okay, on to the next tool. The next tool is the attach tool. I generally don't use it with any other options other than the standard ones, which is relink children. I'm not really sure what the other options do, but we can check them out. So to attach something to something else, you select the first one, you select the second one, and you left click. So left click, and then left click on the object you want to attach to. It's about as simple as that. Let's see what it does when this object is inside. So, okay, this one. Let's turn on attach children. So left click on this one, left click on that one, just as kind of attach parent to child. And when you attach one to the other, it just disappears for some reason. Yeah, like I say, I don't really use it. On the attached children mode, just generally on relink children. On copy mode, this is pretty interesting. What you can do is you can select one and then select the other, and the original one that you wanted to attach to someone else will be copied and then attached. So you can see here these two exist, but so does the original one as well. So that is the attach tool. On to the next. Now we're going to be moving on to surface. So this is the surface tab. First thing we're going to be checking out is edit UV. And we are going to create a box for this. And we're also going to create a material to apply to the box with a texture, so we can demonstrate the UV mapping. So first things first, I'm going to go to the material browser, like so. And we're going to create a new material. So we'll create a copy of this one. I'm going to call this box. I'm going to assign a GTA 5 shader to it because they're easy. Vehicle mesh. Then we're going to apply the vehicle mesh shader to the box. We're going to double click on the material to get the material properties up, and I'm going to add a texture to it. So here's the texture browser. I'm going to add For this, we will just do vehicle generic detail 2. Like so. And then we'll set the specular color to black, so it's just matte. This is by no means the correct way to set up a material, but for the demonstration of UV mapping, it's fine. So, to UV map, you can either click on an object to edit UV. So you click on edit UV, and you click on the object, and it brings up this window. You can keep the original mapping, and it'll basically, I'll just show you what it does. Keep the original mapping from viewport XY, hit OK, and then you switch one of these tabs to UV mapper, and then up here will be your material name. So in this case, it's just box. If you click on that, it will bring up the UV map for your object, and you can move that around with the move tool. You can scale it as well. You can rotate it. You can mirror it if you really want to. And so on and so forth. But there are more options, so we'll check those out. So if we switch to polygon mode and we select the top polygon and the bottom one, we can go to surface, edit UV, and then we can project these from view. So generate new on the UV map 1 channel from viewport XY, which means from whichever viewport you're in, basically, just flat. You can also copy from channels as well as unwrap. The unwrapping tools are not that great. They tend to just fail 90% of the time, so I don't use them. But on a simple object such as this, they'll work fine. But generate new, you hit OK. Let's generate a new UV map there. So now we can jump out of polygon mode. We can switch to the UV mapper material box again. You can see it's right here. And then again, you can move this around. You can scale it. You can rotate it. But that, in a nutshell, is the UV mapper and the UV edit tool. On to the next tool. These are the normals tools. We have calculate normals, unifies normals, projects normals from pivot helper point, and also smooths vertices as well. Now, the only ones that you'll ever really need to use are calculate normals, projects normals out from pivot helper point, as well as smooths vertices. So we'll start with the recalculate normals. So what we're going to do is we're going to weld this with the weld tool. The weld tool is pretty self-explanatory. Just these top ones here, like so. You can see those are all welded. Now the normals look a bit weird. So if we wanted to fix these, what we could do is we could grab the detach tool, again, self-explanatory. We can detach this, like so. And now, even though it's detached and there's edge split here, the normals are still broken. So what we can do is we can go to surface, recalculate normals, and then left click on it, and it'll fix the normals to an extent. It didn't do it all. That's fine. Just because ZMode's being weird about the welded stuff. So we can do that on the other pieces as well. So we will select these ones. We will detach them. And then we can recalculate it all as well. Like so. Smooths normals basically just grabs any normals that are sort of split at any edge split, and it'll smooth them out. It's angle based, so it doesn't always work, but you can sort of mess with the angle and then get it to work like so. So in this case it ruins them, but say you have a nice smooth object but a bit of random edge split has been generated and the normals have been calculated, then you can select all the offending vertices and smooth them out. You can also use C to calculate normals as well. So that is the normals tools. You can also project normals out from the pivot helper point, which we can do as an example here. So we will go to front view, left view is fine actually. We'll bring the pivot helper down a little bit. We'll switch to vertex mode. And if you hold shift and left click, it will project the normals out from the point of view of the pivot helper. So if you bring the pivot helper further down and then do the same thing, the angle sort of changes. You can keep clicking to get a different effect as well. Now, I use this on mirrors in particular because it makes them more reflective. Sort of bends the normals in such a way that makes whatever you're looking at seem more round than it actually is. And that can create some really shiny normals depending on your material setup. A lot of my cars have this done on mirrors, as I said, because it makes them more reflective. I know that some people also use them on police car windows to make them more shiny as well. So that is the normals tools. On to the next tool. So a copy is pretty self-explanatory. Yeah, create a copy, and another box appears. You can also, I'm pretty sure, create an instanced copy, which is basically a copy that does exactly the same thing, except any changes you make to the first one will also affect the second one. So we can bring one of these over here. I think we can edit one of them, and the other one will also edit. At least that's how I think it works. I've never really used it before, so... Yep, you see, it's done it on that one as well. And we can edit this one. And it edits the other one as well. We can really make it look freaky. Like so. So that's the copy tool, as well as the instance copy tool as well. And again, you can do it with children as well. One thing to know about the copy tool and its settings is it has an interaction option. So you can create a copy, keep holding left and move it. That might be annoying for some people, so you should definitely set it to none if you don't want anything to happen when you drag, because it can cause some problems with the positioning of a particular object in your scene, etc. It's definitely something I've run into a couple of times, and ZModeler kind of struggles with stuff that's really precise in terms of vertex positions and object positions, so it's kind of a pain when that moves it. There's also rotate, which I've never used before, but I guess it's just copy and then, yeah, it sort of rotates around the axis. Cool. So that is the copy tool. On to the next one. So this is the Polygon tool. You can create a fan strip or a single. I prefer the single. And here we have a box which has no top, and we're going to fill it in. So we switch to vertex mode for this. And then we left click on the first one, left click on the next one, left click on the one after this. The order matters, so keep that in mind, because if you do it in the wrong order, then stuff gets kind of freaky. Like this. I guess this time it's fine, but yeah, the order does matter, so keep an eye on that. I think it's more in particular with the fan mode, but this is fine. So here we've got 2 tries, which make a quad. And then we will also select this, calculate the normals as well. It has messed up the other normals, but that's fine. We can jump to detach and fix that, like so. So that is the create polygon tool. On to the next one. So now we're in the display tab. We're going to create a few objects. So the local axis is basically the green, red, and blue lines in the center or the corner of an object, or anywhere on an object, really. And these determine sort of their local position in the scene, if that makes any sense. So, for example, in a game engine, if you wanted a wheel, this, for example, representing a wheel spinning around its local axis, you'd want the local axis to be in the center of the object because it's a wheel. If it was off to the left of it or the right of it, then it would rotate around the wrong point and it'll look wobbly and unusual, which for a wheel is definitely not what you want. The local axis also determines positions like where an object rotates around, like doors and stuff. It's not just limited to wheels. There are also other hard-coded sort of positions that are set up for things like the convertible roofs as well. That sort of thing. A lot of rotating related things, but yeah. So with these, what you can do is you can center the pivot to an object like so. So you just select the tool and then left click the object and it'll center it. You can also copy the axis from one object to another. So for example, say we want this box here to have the local axis of this. We'll click on our wheel and then we will left click on the box, and now our local axis matches that of the wheel. Also, if your object has a parent, like so, let's just reset this. If your object has a parent, what you can do is you can reset the axis to the parent. You can access it up here as well in the local axis tools and display. You can also access it via left click, and it's the same with a lot of the tools in here: delete, copy, flip, as well as edit UV, etc. So right click, axis, reset the parent, or just left click with the tool active to reset the parent as well. There's also another button as well called reset pivot helper, and this will reset the object to it'll reset the object local axis to the pivot helper, like so. That's a new one that came with 3.2.1. There is also, in this little arrow here, the reset to world option, which is, these are already both reset to world almost, so that basically just resets the local axis to the center of the scene. So if I turn on the grid here, you can see that's the center of the scene, 0, 0, and that's how that works. There are a few little settings for the local axis tools up here, and this other arrow right above the other one. There is orientation, offset, and both. Generally, you'll leave it on both, but keep object is a fairly important one. So say you want to bring one object to another, what you can do is you can turn on the copy local axis from one object to another, and say we want to bring the box to the wheel. We'll click on the wheel and then click on the box, and it will bring the box because keep object is turned off. And it's the same vice versa. So that's how that works. I don't know what the other options do. I guess they just only keep the orientation or the offset, or both, of course. But again, you can have a play with that. I do encourage you guys to sort of have a play around with it, get comfortable with ZModeler and its tools. They're a little bit convoluted at times, but they generally do what you want them to, which is good. We also have show and hide tools. Not only can you show and hide, obviously, the objects in the scene via the hierarchy, but say you wanted to hide specific vertices, you can do so by selecting the object and then clicking the hide. So click the hide tool and then left click. And it'll only hide it per mode, so it won't hide it in Polygon mode. It will in vertex mode. You can show it by clicking show and it'll show it back again. Sometimes this bugs out and you can't re-show it. Generally, a restart of ZMod will fix it. I've also at one point had to export my object because everything's still there. So for example, if something is hidden here and I hide it and I jump back to object mode, it's still there. It's just in vertex mode. I can't access it because it bugged. But it doesn't bug very often. I've only had it happen once or twice, but it's not too big a deal. But yeah, those are the show and hide tools. And we're going to be moving on to the selection tools next. These are selection tools. There are a lot of them, but we're only going to be using sort of the main ones that you're likely to use when modding GTA 5. Of course, which ones you use most often are up to you, but I'm going to show you the ones that I use a lot. And these are separated, single, and element. So, for example, if you want to select something regardless of its edge split, you'll use element select, like so. So it's right click to select. You can see it's determined by right button up here. And if you want to do a single, you can do that. So just right click on a single and it'll select a single. This works in vertex mode as well. And separated will select everything, but only the island basically. So if there's an edge split and there's another island, then it'll only select that. But for example, if any of these are welded, it'll select both of them, I'm pretty sure. So we can do that. Those are both welded together now, and it'll select all of it now. Obviously, the bottom, it's still a separate island, so it doesn't do that. If we were to, for example, select this again, use the detach tool to detach it, and then deselect everything, select it again, this is now back to being its own island. The normals also suck as well, but we can fix that because we know how to do that now. So yeah, those are the selection tools. On to the next set of tools. So, I've definitely mentioned them a couple of times and also used them in this video, but up here we have the different modes that you can be in. There's vertex mode, edge mode, polygon mode, and object mode. Object mode is the default mode that you'll be in, but say you want to edit some faces, you can do so. Like so. And say, oh, you're not happy with that, I want to edit this vertex to be over here because why not? You can do so as well. Edge mode is similar to vertex mode, but instead of the individual vertices on the end, it does the entire edge. Like so. And then, of course, we have manipulator mode. I've never, ever used the manipulator mode. I don't know what it's for. I assume it may have something to do with rigging, but again, I'm not really knowledgeable on that because that's not what I end up using for modding GTA 5. But that's vertex mode, edge mode, and polygon mode. Now, last but not least, we have the miscellaneous tools. This will be the last of the tools section, and then we just got stuff like primitives, which again I've been using quite a bit in this video. So down here in the bottom right, you see I've used it a little bit. We have the pivot, which toggles whether or not the pivot helper is on. So for example, say we're rotating something. You can see right now it's rotating around the pivot helper and not the local axis of the object. If I turn off pivot, it'll rotate around the local axis of the object like so. And this is the same for anything other than move. Mirror, scale, etc. By default, pivot is turned on, so just keep an eye on that. Auto allows you to basically drag select in the scene. Without auto on, you can't drag select anything. Auto is on by default. I recommend you use it. It basically just allows you to have the quadar selection mode on all the time. Quadar is the same thing. See? And I have it on. I feel it's comfortable. Now, selected mode here determines whether or not an object is selected. It will tell you in the bottom here when it's red that it's selected, and it will turn blue when it's not. Now, sometimes this bugs out, which I feel is the reason why this button exists, and it'll be blue when something is selected. And this can cause some problems, for example, when you're trying to apply materials or do anything with something selected. So sometimes you'll have something selected like this, and it'll be like, nope, it's not selected. You can either, deselect it and then reselect it and it'll update it, or you can just click the selected button when it messes up. That's just a little tip there. And that is the miscellaneous tools. Of course, we also have the active axis as well, which we've explained in this video. So X locks it to the X axis on the screen view. If you've got it to local axis, it will switch to local. And obviously world as well. X, Y, and Z. X and Y can be on at the same time. X, Y, and Z can not be on at the same time. X and Y generally do fine, especially in screen mode. And yeah. Very last thing is the primitives, which we've been using throughout the video a lot. So these are all the primitives, just the general sort of objects that you can create. The one you'll probably use the most, at least I use it quite a lot, is the dummy helper. Now, I use dummy helpers for folders. So, for example, I've got 3 or 4 cars in a Z3D. I put them inside dummy helpers so I know exactly where everything is. Just good for keeping stuff in order. Some people use them for conversion as well, although I don't recommend it because a lot of dummies on a vehicle have specific properties inside the properties user-defined options section inside here. So yeah, I don't really use them for that, but you can, but it's likely to cause some problems, so just keep that in mind when you're converting a vehicle. Obviously, we have all of the standard objects that you can spawn in. They all have their own settings, so we've got the torus, and you can change all these settings, so you can add more cross circles, more parallel circles, base radius, cross radius, whether it's quads or tris, etc., as well as the materials as well. And it's the same story for pretty much every other object in here. So we've got a sphere, and cylinder, our box, or a rectangle, a cone, capsule, just all the standard ones. These are in most modeling programs. And then also the tube, which is quite a cool one. Good for making exhausts. Back before I learned Blender, these were like used all the time, especially the tube. But yeah, those are all of the ZModeler basics. There are more, but most of these you're likely to pick up when actually doing something. You'll also see them in a lot of my tutorial videos as well, but this is the absolute minimum that you need to sort of start doing stuff in ZModeler. Now you know how to move, now you know how to scale, now you know how to mirror, so you can sort of go off and make a simple mod for GTA 5, for example. Following this video, next week will also be a video on exporting correctly, different export settings for different situations, whether or not you have LODs, etc., etc. I really hope you enjoyed this video. Like and subscribe if you want. Goodbye.